Hey everyone, today we're going to kind of continue to think about place value, but we're going to dive into that idea of what we do with place values and decimals, right? We've been working a lot with whole numbers and digits and so on and so forth. So today we're just going to have a quick little what does it mean? What does it mean when we're talking about place value as well as value when it comes to decimals? So quick review, right? When we think about decimals themselves, an easier way to kind of think about decimals is they are part of the whole, right? They're part of that whole number. We can take a number and divvy it up into smaller bits that become our decimals. I think the easiest way maybe to think about that, or the most common way, is we think about that dollar bill, right? Money. I always like to equate decimals and money. We like money. We pay attention to money, so it helps us think about decimals. But if I had this whole, right, this whole dollar, which really could also represent a whole number of one, I can think about how it is that that dollar gets divvied up or broken into different parts. For example, if I took a dollar and I broke it into 4 parts, we think about that. Well, those are quarters, right? Because it takes 4 quarters to make a dollar, and a quarter itself, we call it 25 cents. And as you can see already, we're working with decimals, right? 25 cents. It is 25 cents of the dollar. So this quarter here, same thing, 25 cents. And so on and so forth. And when we take those 4 quarters and we put them together, we actually end up with one whole dollar, right? So those are decimals, right? These are the decimals, so the part. A quarter is part of that whole, right? So let's continue to look at that dollar and break it apart. So here's my dollar. So we partitioned it or divvied it or divided it up into 4ths last time. We could think about another way of doing that when we think about other coins, right? We did a quarter. Maybe we want to do dimes, right? So that would be this idea of breaking something into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Because a dime is 10 pieces. And so if we have these little dimes in here, each one of those, right? A dime, a dime is like that 10 cents, right? And again, there's a decimal. That's that part of the whole. A dime does not equal a dollar. A dollar is one whole. That's the whole number, not a hole like a hole in the ground. Not that kind of hole, right? That's this. Nope. We're talking about a whole, right? So the whole, all of it, complete $1, and then these decimals are parts of it. So that's kind of a concept around what decimals are. There's parts of these wholes, and we can do that as well with just simple whole numbers. Again, I can just say 1 and not think about it as a dollar, and I could model it like this, and it's just a whole. It's a picture that I'm drawing. And again, maybe we partition or divide or divvy, right? Cut up these parts, these equal parts. Let's just pretend those are equal. Maybe they're not perfect, but let's, for the sake of the point, let's move on. And one of these would be 25, just like a quarter, right? 25. But let's kind of talk about more like how we read and write those decimals, because there are place values with decimals. And that's what we really want to be thinking about today, that decimals have place value. So if we went back to our place value world, and let's just go here. We know we have our 1s and our 10s and our, yes, hundreds, good answer. And then our thousands. And really, that could have been different colors, because if you remember before, we talked about periods, right? This is the 1s period. It's that group of 3. And then this would be part of the thousands period. Well, there's also these decimals, like there's a period of decimals as well, if you will. And it's the other world that lives right here on the other side of 1s, right? Because it is a part of 1. They're actually less than 1. They are a fractional part, a decimal, all these things, they're equivalent. So it's a part of this whole. and it's these little bits that make it. Just like we know that it takes 10 ones to make a 10 and 10 tens to make 100 and so on and so forth in base 10. Well, we have these little decimal parts that when we put them together, they'll equal one whole. And so let's just stop dancing around it and name it. When we're talking about the first place value in decimals, we call these the tenths. Tenths, TH. And one thing to remember by that that's really helpful is because it takes 10 of these to make one. It's a tenth, a tenth. So it's like tens, but it's a tenths. And then this other place value we call the hundredths. So notice there is no once place. There's a tenths place and a hundredths place. And there's more, but we're only going to really focus on those today. So I'm going to move on so we have a little more space. So let's go back to that. Let's go here. So this was the ones place, the tens, and the hundreds, right? These are our whole numbers. Oh, whoa, no. Oops, just kidding. I didn't do that. And then we think about that, those decimal place values that happen afterwards. We have the tenths place, and we have the hundredths place. And these are called hundredths because it takes 100 of these to equal one whole. And these are the tenths because it takes 10 of these to equal one, or one whole, right? So that's really what these are about. So how do we look at this? How do we read and write these numbers? And that's kind of what we're going to look at today, just as a basic walkthrough of decimals. So as we start to see decimals, we can, if we can read them, we can write them. That's the really cool thing about decimals, is that if we can read them, we can write them. So let's think about what this says. Notice I have no whole numbers whatsoever. So in order to just read this and write this, if we think about the different forms, so we can put this in word form, I just see the number 13. That's what I see. But it's also in the decimal place value. And that last decimal place value that we see that it's in, this last place value here, this was the hundredths place. So if I was to write this or read it or say it, I just have 13 hundredths. That's what this says, 13 hundredths. That's what it is. You just look to what is the place value of the last digit and read the number and then say that. So let's try this one. This time I do have a whole number. I have the number 2. I mean, that's what that says, 2. So let's think about that, 2. And then we have this decimal. Well, the decimal says something. It actually says the word end. If you remember when we talked about whole numbers, we talked about when we read whole numbers, we don't say end. And now we get to say it. So here's 2 end, and then again, what does that say? Well, it says 29. And then the place value, hundredths. So it's all kind of squeezed in there, sorry, that's hundredths. Oh boy. Oh boy, hard to read. 2 and 29 hundredths, right? So now here's this last one. And if we look at it again, there's no whole number, so I don't have to say something and something. I'm not going to say 0 and. It doesn't matter. I don't walk around and say I have 0 and 34 cents in my pocket, right? So we're just going to look at the number itself. And the number itself is 7, and it's in the hundreds. So this is 7 hundredths. Okay, let's look at a few more. That was kind of a crash course. Let's try this. Let's try this. And let's try this. No, let's not do that last one. Same number. Let's do that. See that? I didn't either. Okay. So again, you just read it. Here's a 3. I don't have any whole numbers to say, so I don't have to worry about whole numbers, and I just see a 3. And then I just write the place value or say the place value. It's in 3. Well, that first place value is the tenths. And that's okay if you don't remember all this right away. Like, you can go back and look at what those place values are, right? And it's good to have a place value chart in front of you. And we'll work on that as we go, but this is just 3 tenths, okay? So how about this one? Well, there is a whole number, so I'm gonna write that for 7, and then that decimal says and. And then I have 2/10. 2/10. Okay, so that's what that one says. And then here, again, here's the whole number, 2. And, right, that's the decimal. And then this number, 13. But where is that last digit? It is in the hundreds place. So 2 and 13 hundredths. So that's really what we're looking at today. Is just like, how do we read and write some decimals for now? Don't worry, we're going to get deeper into this. So don't panic if you're like, oh my goodness, what does any of this mean? This is just a foundation to get us going. So I'm going to put these up. I'm going to ask that you try them and kind of think about what that might mean. Remember to post some questions up in Schoology about this. If you want, you can even post what you wrote as these as your answers. And then look for the quizzes and so on and so forth, and all the other videos that we're going to have diving into decimals and thinking about decimals and place value. So again, don't get yourself all worried if this is confusing. Decimals are difficult, but once you work and practice through them, trust me, they really start to make some sense. So again, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Absolutely.